What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It for a Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now.
Welcome back to another episode of the Do It for a Living podcast. I'm Kevin Dubois. Before I get started, I wanted to take a second to invite everybody to the My Shop Assist YouTube channel. We take a lot of time to make sure we make videos on how all the features work. And in particular, I have one called My Shop Assist, How It's Used in a Performance Shop, which is exactly what it sounds. It's just a video to demonstrate how the software is used in an actual performance shop, which would be obviously Evolution Dynamics here. And if you own a shop or work at a shop or would like to see kind of how it works, that's a great overview, just kind of general idea of what you're doing with it. And I encourage you to watch the video, and if it's something you can use at your shop, reach out to us and get in touch. Okay, I have with me Joseph Potak. He is a former employee of Texas Speed, and he's now venturing off onto his own thing called HP Cult, which is currently a podcast and a website, but it's going to be kind of I would call it a community. So Joseph, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and so this is an in-person interview. You yourself have your own podcast. People who are listening to this podcast can also listen to his podcast shortly hereafter. But why don't you first tell us who you are, like how you got involved in cars, and kind of give us your history.
My startup was a little bit different or maybe unconventional. When I was a kid, I never saw cars as my future, other than always saying, "Oh, I'm going to fix the family's car for free," and because families always tend to have bad vehicles when you're a kid, it seems. But my background kind of go all through school, whether it was middle school or high school, was more kind of computer based. I was kind of like the computer nerd that was the only guy in his class for computer programming, which was weird, being the only person in your class to take attendance. And that kind of went on until I was like I would say sophomore, junior in high school. And at that point, what came available in that era was auto shop.
Yeah.
So, I wasn't really into cars, but, I had to take some kind of extracurricular type class like that.
Yeah.
And so I signed up for the automotive shop. And, it was, at the beginning of the class, he asked, "What is your path? What do you want to do when you get out of school?" And I put computer programmer, right? Because that's what I thought my path was. It is taking a far step to that. But it is kind of relevant in what we do today, though. Sure. If you think about how involved that knowing how computers work makes you kind of understand how vehicles work nowadays.
And from an upper level, there's a lot of like project management and creativity. There's a lot of similarities in that respect. Obviously, the actual work is completely different, right? Like programming versus grinding a set of cams is different.
I was kind of like the video game nerd too, and I remember one of the projects I did, and this is going to show my age. Programming an Apple IIe computer, a monochrome type display, and one of my high five moments to myself was making like the little Mario icon animate across an Apple IIe screen. Like I was high fiving myself. You could do that now with a calculator, I think, but back then that was pretty much a pretty big win. But the auto shop, you're young, you kind of make new friends. I made a lot of friends in automotive class, and basically we would go out and play with our cars at lunch and kind of have some, I'll call it illegal street races, because what do you do when you get a kid in a car? Yeah, go out and play around with it. And that was kind of like the infancy of this whole thing that I turned into. Fast forward, when I graduated, my job career was not a programmer. It was now, I found something I'm good at.
Okay.
I'm going to do car stuff. And immediately out of school, you get the job offers and you take, the job offer and you find out how much you don't know pretty quickly. But it is a fast track. Once you're hands-on in this industry, you pick up a lot of stuff along the way in a very fast way because, if you mess up, you have to fix it.
Yep.
There's not somebody to rescue you. You have to fix it yourself. So you learn a lot of that stuff pretty early on in the career. And automotive takes and I always say this, it probably takes a good 5 years to feel comfortable.
Oh, for sure.
During that time, you don't know that you're not uncomfortable with it.
Right.
But after 5 years, you realize, year one was bad.
You start with a high confidence that I know a lot, but you very quickly realize you don't.
Right.
And I'm 20 years into this, and I still feel like I'm like way behind the curve. And that's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right?
Yes.
The more you know, the less you know, or the more you know, the more you don't know enough.
Yes. And I think everybody that goes through that path realizes it. And, after a certain point, you're just so invested that you can't even turn back. Like I would say, let's see, 94. I mean, I'm 31 years in of working full-time in automotive. That's a long time.
So what did you start with out of high school then? What kind of
So
job?
I was offered a job at a place that did, in their name, it was kind of a little bit deceptive. It was called Carbs and Tunes.
Okay.
So it was just like a normal independent repair facility. There's like 5 techs there. And so I got a mix of everything from, early EFI stuff to carburetors to a ton of freeze plugs, which I don't know why, but in that instance in my life, and maybe because I was kind of the new guy, I did a ton of freeze plugs, and I've never done any since. Like, it was just like I did every freeze plug in that town, I think. But you learn along the way. You learn, hey, this is how you clean gaskets. This is how you seal gaskets. This is the right antifreeze mixture. All of that stuff is all kind of that foundation.
Sure.
And the performance stuff was always kind of in the back of my head because, of that high school days of racing each other and playing with cars in the auto shop and having friends with what I thought was fast cars. Turns out they weren't fast cars compared to now.
They may have been back then, right?
Back then, yeah. I don't know. 14 second cars is probably about the era of this. My first car was a G-Body, a Monte Carlo, that I bought for like $300 that wasn't running. Like most, I still buy non-running cars somehow. And basically up into my age 19, I had to build it. I had to put something in it. Pulled out the old oil-using engine, and I built a 33 stroker, which is a pretty kind of cool engine for a 19-year-old to build on a 19-year-old budget. And I did a 700 R4 in that car too. I was at the point where I couldn't do like gears or build transmission, so I paid somebody to do the transmission. I knew how to do engines. That was easy for me. And so having your own project car kind of builds you up even more, because now when you break something,
you can fix it.
You can fix it. or you have to be forced to fix it. And I was always one of those guys that was resourceful, where I would learn how to do everything because I didn't want to pay somebody. Because, well, for one, I didn't have the money to pay somebody for everything I could do or needed to be done. So, if I broke a valve spring, I was the guy fixing the valve spring.
Okay.
And what have you. And, time goes on and you're still into it. I didn't do it as my career at that point. I'd taken normal repair jobs, and then that was in New Mexico. I lived in New Mexico at that time.
Okay.
Some of my friends went to Scoggin Dickey Chevrolet in Lubbock, who is a performance parts dealership too.
Okay.
So they have a service center, and then they have a performance parts up front, kind of like a mini Summit is what I would call it.
Okay.
But
I've heard the name before.
Yeah.
Scoggins Dickies or whatever.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. Scoggin Dickey. Now I'm in a town where West Texas is a hotbed for performance.
Yeah.
And I'm in a town where I meet other people that like doing what I like doing. And so I met Jason Mangum, who was the partner of Texas Speed when they started.
Okay.
I met these guys before Texas Speed started. So Jason, he had a 98 Trans Am, and we'd go racing, we'd go break stuff, we'd come back, and we'd, after hours at Scoggin, we'd be fixing it on the lifts. And, this is in the era of, this is around the year 2000. LS hasn't really been out for that long. Now, I'd already been trained from the GM factory training on the LS engines from working in a dealership. And so, I was kind of the guru, even though I really, like you said, you look back and you're like, I didn't know anything. But I was like the local guru of the LS engines, even to the point where customers of Scoggin would call in and say, hey, what size push rods do I need for this LS 6 cam that I bought? And the sales guy would come and find me in the service department and ask me. And so this is way before anybody even knew the common sizes. So, I would relay the information to them. And one thing led to another. All of these races we're going up against, common shops. We'd go to the drag races and race shops, and we were coming home with the trophies, and we were just like some hillbillies from West Texas is what it felt like, showing up with an open trailer against people with the stacker trailers and showing up and taking basically their trophies. They should have won, but we were the guys taking home the trophies. And all of those success stories kind of made it seem like, what, hey, we should do something with this. We have a really good core. We had Trevor, who you've interviewed before,
Yes.
Trevor Doling.
Yep.
Jason, who is the other co-owner of Texas Speed. And, both of them combined with me knowing kind of the nuts and bolts of the engine and stuff kind of made a really good team.
Okay.
And so we started Texas Speed late 2002. You have to remember the 4th Gen F body was ending. Mm-hmm. It ended that year. So everybody said, oh, this is a horrible idea. Yep. You don't have a car to work on. Who's going to come to you? And, we still had the C5 and the GTO was coming around the corner, which kind of, I don't know, to me kind of turned into a little bit of a flop because it didn't really carry through.
It was a big, heavy car too.
Yeah. And, well, it seems to be the trend with every car after that era. They just get heavier and heavier. And so, that was... we started up Texas Speed. It was a 5,000 square foot building, the first one, which seemed huge day one. We outgrew shipping on day two. Okay. Like we had to expand shipping immediately. And I think a lot of it was we were in the right place at the right time.
Okay.
The forums were really big.
Yep.
We advertised on forums. We went to the races. And we just had a really good team. And we started that snowball, which is what it turned into today. And it just kept growing and growing, and the more products we would add, the more it would grow. We added cylinder heads, we added engines.
Were you guys starting off as a service or parts? Or
we did start off as doing installs. So like parts we would sell.
You were the installer.
I was the installer, yeah.
Okay.
I was the lead installer and kind of the gopher installer at the same time because it was just me. And we did hire some help along the way. Like when we got too busy, we had some, family friends or friends of the sales guys would come in and help out, tear down cars, and I would get to put some of them together. And it was install for years. I want to say we stopped doing installs around 2011, mainly because if you look at like what the business does for parts compared to the installs are a very small drop in the bucket compared to the parts at that point. And what it was more of a nuisance to do the installs than to do what we wanted to do was product development.
Yeah.
So around that same era, we bought the in-house chassis dyno and basically shut down installs and started focusing all on our own stuff.
And I think that's really a trend. Like I am behind the curve on that one in that like I just kept sticking with the install part of it. But I really do find when you become a master of the platform you're working on, the next step really is developing the parts. And then your install, when you're actually making your own parts and making good margins on it, that's the direction you go. But you still need to be able to like make sure they fit a car. So you still have to maintain a little bit of like install work, like a hidden lift in the back there where you can test stuff.
We still had, a
stuff.
couple of lifts to where we still had them. Even today, the shop still has lifts for test fitting and trial and error stuff or doing like kind of some YouTube builds if you want to do YouTube builds. So like you don't really lose the installers when you do product development. You basically focus on making stuff that you currently sell better.
Sure.
So now you have the time to do it.
Yes.
Now R&D is a huge expense to any company, like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. But the payoff is now you're creating parts that didn't exist last month that you could sell.
Yes.
Which, exponentially sells even more because a part you create, now makes you money. Whereas last month, it was just an idea. It made you zero.
Right.
It cost you money to make it to that point. Then once you have it on the shelf, one of the last camshafts I developed before I left Texas Speed was called the Chopacabra cam. It's a silly name. I made up the name.
Chopacabra?
Chopacabra. So
Chopacabra. Okay. Like a chupacabra.
Like chupacabra, but Chopacabra because, V8 guys want a choppy cam.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, it was a silly cam. Like I think I wrote the specs down in my like scratch pad when the bosses were like, hey, we need a choppy cam. I like wrote these specs down and I'm like, I didn't even do any math or anything. I'm like, yeah, I think that'll work. I'll do the math later. And then, I'd be like, hey, how about we name it this? And like, you could see the wheels in the room turning. And some of these people were not car people. They were just like, marketing guys and stuff. And they're like, yeah, we think we could work with that. And what's funny is like really not a whole lot of R&D in this cam. Like I brought one of my engines from home because we didn't have the particular engine we were targeting it for. So I brought it from home. We ground a cam. And by this time I'd done the math to see if everything was right. Put in the engine, check piston and valve and all the basics. And we ran on the dyno. It did what we thought it would do. So it was not even like we vetted basically the idea, made sure it made power, made sure it was choppy enough. And, that silly cam that has no R&D hardly at all. It sells, like the last I heard, it sold like $2 million a year of that one cam. Yeah, and I think we had like 80 cams in the catalog. Now, the other ones didn't do as well as that one.
Okay.
But it was just funny that this one cam that just was like, a silly idea.
That's like people who call me for tuning. It's like, hey, do you do the Pops and Gurgles tune? I'm like so many people call and ask for that, but like it's like no, I don't, because it makes the cars run like trash, right? Like it's like no, I don't want to make the tune not good to make it sound funny or cool.
Right,
or whatever,
right. Yeah, tuning like people have asked me for those cams or those tunes in the past, and I'm like, I don't even really know how to make it do that. I always thought that was a bad thing. Like I want to make that go away. If I could make that go away, then I would know how to do it, how to make it come back, right? But yeah, the Texas Speed era was good, and they had sold, I want to say about 5 years ago, and that was kind of like the writing on the wall for all of us OG employees that hey, our time here's done. We set up this company. It's set up for success. Whoever owns it now, you could make it more successful or maybe keep running it the way you want to run it.
Sure.
I'm not a big private equity fan after seeing kind of some of the decisions being made. And I think they have a really good thing, though, if they want to keep it going.
Yeah. I mean, like I heard in your other podcast, they had like 100 employees when they sold
yeah,
it, right?
I want to say it was like 96, 97 when the company was sold. And I want to say it's probably in the 80s now.
Okay.
Maybe low 80s.
Maybe if Trevor's listening to this, maybe he'll check his messages, because I messaged him about a month ago about.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to hit him up. We do with some of the Texas Speed guys and some former Texas Speed guys. We go with Trevor. Shows up sometimes. So Tuesday nights
he
is
has the coolest car collection.
Yeah,
I love the cars he owns.
Yeah,
so.
I told him I wanted him on my podcast, and we are going to do a like quickie shop tour. And he's like, "Let me think about that." I'm like, "I understand. You don't want to show anybody your car collection, but I think it's cool." Yeah. I mean, you got to show off some of your stuff sometimes.
Oh man, is it the Lincoln Continental with the suicide doors?
Yeah,
that he's got? Oh,
the
my
slab.
God. That was so cool. Yeah.
That car.
It reminds me of the Matrix.
I think that car's like, I'm probably exaggerating, but I think it's like 25 feet long or something. I don't even know if you could fit that in a trailer anymore. But yeah, that car's so cool, and it's got a LT engine in it.
And he
Gen
bought
5.
that. He bought that built. He did not build it.
No,
right?
no, he bought it. It was painted.
Okay.
And it looked like partially restored.
Okay.
But I had like the original engine in it, and he drove it like when he picked it up.
It's like way too slow because it weighed
I think it made like 100 horsepower or 90 horsepower. But what in his world, it was leaking oil.
Okay.
So, at that point, it's like, hey, I own a speed shop. We need to put something that we kind of create in this car. And so he did an LT engine with a Edelbrock supercharger.
Okay. But so you left Texas Speed. And where did you go after that?
I went to Brian Tooley Racing.
Okay. We've also talked to.
Yeah. I liked kind of the format of that. And, the key there was they weren't private equity.
Okay.
And also they were almost like so part for part of what I was doing at Texas Speed. It was like a really good plug and play for me.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of attractiveness there. The bad thing was, moving to Kentucky in my case. So, I had, a house in Kentucky. I had a house here. I had the girlfriend and dogs at home. So after a couple of months, you kind of miss them. And, that job kind of dried up. But I was hired to be director of manufacturing and director of product development, which product development's right up my alley. The manufacturing was a little bit new, but because I was so involved with the Texas Speed manufacturing of building them up from, helping Jason and in kind of seeing it happen.
Yeah.
It was actually almost a shoe-in for the manufacturing. So when I got there, they were only making like one valve cover at a time on one machine, and they had a full machine shop.
Okay.
So no camshafts were being produced. They had the tools, lathes to make valve spring retainers. They had the block machines. They had block hones. So they were making valve covers and balancing rotating assemblies. And when I left, everything was online.
Okay.
So it was a lot of work to get all of that stuff online. And being the project manager of that stuff, you're more or less just getting the right people aligned to get stuff done.
Sure.
And taking stuff off their task list and telling them what's more important, what's prioritized for the programmer.
Okay.
You do this, then you do this, then you do this. When you finish that, you move to the next thing. You don't do a little bit of this and then a little bit of that and a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You have to finish stuff. That way, once it's finished, now it can produce stuff.
Yes.
And then you don't have to babysit it.
Okay.
So a lot of that stuff was just kind of getting figured out, and getting that stuff done.
Okay.
And one of the goals there for me being in charge of product development and manufacturing was getting back orders off of they had a back order sheet. Getting back orders as low as possible.
Sure.
And so even like my last couple of days there, I think I'd gone from like we had 120 back orders when we started. I think the day I left, there was 18 back orders, which is 18 individual parts, which isn't a huge amount of back orders for a machine shop. You've waited for parts before. 18's not a lot of people waiting. But the goal is to have 0.
Yes.
So it was on its way to that.
Okay. And so you weren't there for a super long time. You wanted to come back to Texas here. So what did you do when you came back?
It worked out pretty good to where I kind of came back. And, when you're in this industry, you always have kind of like people in your back pocket. Mm-hmm. You could almost say, hey, I got this thing. If I just reach out to this guy or this guy. What I came back to, I kind of took a few months off because I just needed to reset and kind of figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
So I took off 2 months, but in that 2 months, for some reason, whenever I'm not working, I'm the busiest I ever have. I don't know how. You're making 0 money, but I'm the busiest I've ever been anytime I'm not working somehow. Anyway, I had a friend that owned a Jeep shop, and I'm like, you know what? The performance world has kind of, I don't know, been tarnished a little bit in my world. Like I thought, you know what? I don't want to go back to Texas Speed. I didn't even try to go back. I don't really want to do any more performance parts. I need like a break. I need like some breathing room. And plus, when you are neck deep in this industry like I am, your own cars kind of stay parked because you're burned out on them.
Right.
So
you work on everybody else's, but never your own. Yeah.
Yeah, never your own. And so, I'm like, how can I do, rejuvenate myself a little bit to where I want to be in the performance world? And so I had a buddy that owned a Jeep shop. And he had a job. He had actually a couple of job openings. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, I've known you for a couple of years. I could do these jobs, but I'm not sure if it's up my alley or not. Let me come and talk to you. Let me shadow your guys. Let me talk to your guys at lunch. I took a couple of the guys to lunch. And, at the time it made sense to, do that and step away from the performance industry a little bit. Now, I say that it's still performance because their Jeeps have, and I have a Jeep. I have 2 Jeep or had 2 Jeeps.
Yeah, lift kits and all the little body kits that they put on them. And there's a million things to do those too. So,
and it's always been my escape to do the Jeep stuff or motorcycles. Anything non-LS has been kind of like the reset for me in the past.
Okay.
So I had the Jeep. I have a modified Jeep. I actually am doing LS swap in my Jeep right now. So, it can't get away from the LS swaps at all. So I went to him and I told him, hey, this is kind of about the salary I was expecting to make. I don't think you could get there. And he's like, well, we could create a job for you and basically take a little bit of my job and a little bit of the shop foreman job and, morph it into something that's up your alley. And I did that. And, it was great. But I'm so used to the aftermarket that it kind of got boring really quick.
Okay.
And I just, about 6 months in, I just knew, at some point I'm going to like really get burned out on this because it's not, oil leaks and water pump leaks and radiators. That's not really, nobody wants to go from making 1,000, 1,500 horsepower cars to fixing radiators and oil leaks.
Yep.
Now I wasn't actually doing the work, but I had to be in charge of the people doing the work. And sometimes it wears you out just doing normal stuff.
That's my life story, man. Like, I want to work on the fast cars, but if I want to do that, apparently I have to fix all the oil leaks too, right? So,
or the broken transmissions,
yes,
all of that stuff. But yeah, I knew kind of probably I only did that for about a year, but I knew about halfway through that I was going to have to do something different. And, you always have these things, like I said, you always have stuff in your back pocket. So, the website stuff that I've been wanting to do, I've been wanting to do that for a long time. So,
well, you touched on one thing before we get to the website. You touched on doing your LS swaps. So you do a lot of LS swaps, and you wrote a book on it, right?
Oh, yeah. I have a couple of books out. So my first book is How to Build and Modify GMLS Series Engines, which was published around 2008.
Okay, so a long time ago then.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Relatively a while ago.
Engine stuff doesn't change a whole lot, so it's still a relevant book. At some point, I'll probably revise it.
Revision number 2, right?
Revision 2 is on the horizon. Yeah.
And we were at dinner before this, but you said you sold 30,000
That one's done about 30,000 copies. Okay. Yeah.
That's like, I don't know anybody who sold that many books. So you're the first.
Well, I don't either. I mean, it's no Harry Potter, but it was fun. And I've always been kind of a forum nerd anyway. So writing books is basically the biggest, longest post you could ever think about an engine.
Sure.
I mean, that's the closest equivalent I could say. Because, on the forums, when you're helping people, somebody has a problem, if you know the answer, I think most people would want to help that guy. And so I would be, I've been a moderator on LS1 Tech since day one, and even currently, even though forums has kind of slowed down quite a bit. But, I got that opportunity through Motor Books. And they were just looking for, a warm body to write a book.
Okay.
I think they were looking for somebody that knew a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think they realized who they were getting. But yeah, the first book did really well. I didn't know I could write. So that was learning a new skill. And
that was before you could make the computers do it for you.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't even, if I'm paid to write, I wouldn't even want AI to write for me. Because I think, granted, it might say the same thing, but I would feel right if AI was writing for me.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree, except that, at least in my case, I am really terrible at spelling, and my grammar's terrible, and so I would need AI to do it for me.
Yeah, and now I'm not against AI for some stuff. So like I've used AI for like in the Jeep world, that Jeep job, I would use it to write like a job description down.
Okay.
Or like a standard operating process. I would use it for that kind of stuff, kind of like that kind of peon work that,
Sure.
managers tend to get all the time for some reason. Somebody else could do this, but no, we're going to have the top paid guy do this stupid stuff.
So was the book pulled from like your forum post essentially? Like the text,
no.
or the
So my editor was actually a guy that his name was Chris Endres, and he was involved in kind of like some car scene, some racing. He organized some F-body races, and then he became a book editor. And he was just like I said, I saw the post, and he's just looking. Hey, can somebody write this book? I've got this opening. I need somebody to write this book. And he has his own book too. He has a LS1, LS6 engine book
from that same motor.
His was probably about 5 or 6 years old at that time. And so my question was like, why are you looking for somebody to write a better book than you have? And his book was great. Like it was kind of like one of the first, I would say it's kind of like a necessary reading of LS if you really want to learn everything, because his has stuff my book doesn't have in it.
Okay.
Like my book has stuff his doesn't have in it, vice versa. That first one is, like I said, how to build and modify GMLS series engines. So it goes into, a little bit of camshafts, a little bit of everybody's cylinder heads, because I did work at Texas Speed, but I wanted an unbiased book. So I traveled to Trick Flow, which we didn't sell. I traveled to Harlan Sharp. I traveled to Wiseco Pistons, which we didn't sell. And I wanted stuff that wasn't in my wheelhouse to talk about in a book. So people didn't say, hey, that's a Texas Speed book. It's not a Texas Speed book.
Okay.
It's an everything LS book. And so I put in a lot of stuff that we weren't even, kind of doing at the time. And, some of that even turned into big relationships to where, eventually Texas Speed bought Wiseco Pistons, and they bought Harlan Sharp rockers. And, it turned into kind of like a bigger networking thing than what I thought it would be. Even though I didn't really have control over that stuff, I'd had influence at Texas Speed to, I would tell the guys, hey, we should sell these pistons. We're having problems with this other company, but why don't we try this company? And, sometimes that little suggestion would net into a really good idea at a company.
So that's how you wrote the content for it, and then you had that other guy was your editor for it?
Just the editor. They don't change the content. They'll do like what's called a copy edit, where they go in there and check the grammar, make sure the punctuation's right, make sure I'm not saying anything offensive, or, they're reading it to make sure it makes sense.
Yes, okay.
Because sometimes car people can write stuff that doesn't make sense. But once you see it edited, it's kind of like listening to yourself after you record yourself. Yeah. You make it better. And so after I saw the edited version, they really prettied it up a lot, because I sent them, a bunch of text and a bunch of photos and where to put the photos.
Okay.
And they made that book look like art. And I'm not a designer, so I was like blown away after I got like the hard copy back. Like, oh wow, they really made this thing something. And at this point, none had even sold yet. Like, I had no idea. I mean, this could be a flop, right? I'm like, this could be game over. There may not be a second book in my horizon.
And so this is an actual, like a printed book, not like an, I guess now you like put it on like Amazon where it's just.
Yeah, you could do, they do have like a
book or whatever.
They do have an ebook, but it just doesn't have the same effect, because it is kind of almost like what I originally sent them, with the text here, photos here. Yeah. And it's like, good luck putting it together. And a lot of people will follow the captions of a book instead of following the book text itself. Yeah. And you can do that. You can do that because every photo has a caption of.
And you must have a lot of photos in it then.
Yeah, I think it has like 320 photos.
Okay, so a lot then.
Yeah, and what's nice about books, and one of my questions at the beginning of doing this book, another question I had is, like, I knew the internet, at this point, I'd say the mainstream internet was 10 years old. Yeah, 2008. I was like, who's going to buy printed books? Like, I'm like, who am I going to sell this to? You have forums. We don't even really have, like, nobody used YouTube like that, like we use today. Right. But like today, I would still have the same questions. I'm like, even though I know the books have sold and are popular and kind of generate their own leads and all that stuff to where people will automatically buy them because I've had success at those ones. Mm-hmm. I would be very hesitant to do a book today. Like, if somebody approached me today, I'd be like, you know what, maybe not. But, like I said, they are their own almost entity. And I think putting something in people's hands versus, a how-to on Facebook is two different things.
So how did you distribute the book? Did you buy yourself like 100 copies? And
no. The publisher does all of this stuff. Okay. So they copyright it for me. They print it for me. Now, in the future, I may do my own distribution and stuff like that.
Because they're obviously going to take a sizable cut.
They do take a sizable cut. Right. Yeah, the author's kind of like the last guy paid, I think. It's paid off a like royalty basis, so it's like 12%.
The more books you sell, you
of course. Like, if I sold 10 copies, they would be asking for money back, I think. But thankfully, I think it broke even at like about the year mark. And then ever since then, you get a mailbox check every 6 months from it.
And you're still getting mailbox checks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I got one a couple of weeks ago.
Nice.
Yeah. And so those aren't big money. Like, you're not going to retire off of books unless you sell something crazy.
I think the thing is you write a lot of them, right? And then you eventually
you have to do a ton of them.
Residual income.
Right. You'll have to constantly be adding, because I think some will do end of life before, like, you're not going to retire and then have a book of, 2002 Camaro, right? Like 50 years later, I wouldn't think that would survive that life. But my second book was on, speaking of, my second book was on the 93 to 2002 F-body, the Camaro and Firebird. Okay. So the Gen 2 LT and the LS engine. Now, I knew way more about the LS engine than I knew about the Gen 2 LT, even though I come from that world of small blocks.
You guys should have put like it on the Texas Speed, checkout thing. Like,
yeah, I know, hindsight.
Check out my book, and then every time you can sell a product, they throw a book in a box.
Yeah,
right?
There actually is some companies that do that. Like, they'll sell an engine rebuild kit. And I put them in touch with the publisher to actually do that. So like my third book, which I haven't gotten to yet, there's swap companies that sell that book along with their swap kits.
Okay, yeah, because it's about LS swaps.
LS swaps,
right?
yeah. So the natural progression is, you have the LS engine book, you have the F body book, and now you have the swap book, taking that LS engine and putting in stuff that never really came with LS engines.
Okay.
So, whether it's a 67 Camaro, a G body, like my first car would have been, I'm still looking for one of those, by the way. One of those, or a Mustang.
Mods or
yeah,
other
it's
types
pretty
of
much
manufacturers.
anything. And I always equate swaps to anything pre-2000 is fair game.
Okay.
Like any vehicle that you could think of. My most odd swap so far, though, has been my son has a Saturn Sky, like a 2008 Saturn Sky. Mm-hmm. And I'd seen that some people have done it. It's not a hugely popular swap.
There's a Pontiac version of the same.
Yeah,
right?
Solstice. Yeah. And so my son, being the trickster that he is, he went and bought a Saturn Sky and knew Dad would be all on board with swapping it. And so we bought the Sky, and guess who had to do most of the work? I got to do most of the work. The wiring specifically was kind of the challenge there. Yeah. Putting an engine in, you could fabricate and make stuff work and anything. But the wiring to make the dash work, to make the cruise control work.
So that was not a CAN bus car.
That is a CAN bus.
Okay, it was.
Yeah. So that was a little bit.
CAN when nobody really knew what they're doing.
Yeah,
now I feel
exactly.
like everybody's got an idea of what
there are some translators now that can make it a lot easier, or gateway modules that make it a lot easier to communicate the different languages and stuff. But yeah, there was a lot of unknowns because not a whole lot of people were doing that stuff to that level to where everything worked. And the people that were doing it are doing it. You're paying for the harness. You're paying a lot more money for an LS harness that is plug and play into your Saturn Sky that makes everything work. Okay. And I was doing it with the LS swap harness that I made into a Saturn Sky harness by hybriding them together. It was a lot of work, but it turned into a fun little car that is a death trap.
And then you wrote a book about it, essentially. Yeah.
The swap book has been... I do have some photos of the Sky in the swap book, actually. So, when I revised that book since then, because as is everything, whether it's iPhone, a watch, a computer, everything progresses. Yeah. And the swap world progressed way faster than the LS engine did. So as far as swaps, is like when I first wrote that swap book, 2010 or so is when it was published. In 2010, like Holley Performance actually had no parts hardly at all. Okay. So they didn't have the Holley Dominator.
They made parts, but it was really like carburetors and old.
Yeah. Not for the LS swaps though, is what I mean. So like my first edition of my book didn't really have anything from Holley in it. Uh-huh. And then, fast track to 2022 when I revised this book that I think was published 23. There was a lot of stuff that had been added from everybody in the world, in the swap world. So the swaps have changed. The whole swap game changed from 2010 to 2022. And so I had to revise that one first. Yeah. And so I got on board with everybody that, made new parts. Holley was a big player. A couple other companies added new motor mounts. There was Dakota Digital made some retro gauges. Okay. So there was a lot of new stuff that I just wanted to share and give to the people that were buying these books, because the stuff from 2010 was a little bit dated. And so I ended up revising that book.
Okay. And so are they actually like separate books then? Or
currently, they actually are separate books because they still have the first edition printed. Okay. So when that one runs out,
then there will be no more of them.
There will be no more, and then it'll be.
But you can buy 100%. The second edition one now too, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. You can buy either or, as far as I know. Now, I'm sure it's very close to end of life for version 1 because if they're not printing more, then it's just whatever's on hand in the warehouse right now.
So have you gone to a library and seen your book yet?
I've gone to Barnes and Noble and seen them, and it is really kind of a mind trip to see your name on a book on a shelf, because, and I don't really like wear this on my sleeve. Like I don't go places. Like I was at Summit Racing and doing a podcast with Brian Nutter at Summit Racing.
I'm an author.
No, I didn't say anything about it, but like as I'm doing this podcast, I let me use their studio, which was kind of cool because it was like perfectly controlled audio. They had like the right wall decor and stuff. And as I'm doing that, I see somebody walk in, and I'm like, out of the corner of my eye. Now, of course, I have studio lights on me, so I can't tell who
It's
it
really
is.
bright, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm blinded. I see somebody there. Granted, the lights help because you stay focused on who your guest is, who you're talking to. And then the guy's there for like 20 minutes and then he leaves. And it's a little bit distracting because I'm like, man, what happened? Like, am I getting kicked out, or did they find something? Did they tow my car? Whatever it is. You have no idea. And then at the end, they're like, hey, they said you wrote some books. I'm like, oh, yeah, I did. Because you kind of, when it's not in front of you and you're not talking about it all the time, you kind of forget that you've done this kind of achievement. And I think I should probably talk about it a little bit more in my life, and I just don't.
Yeah, you wrote the book on it. That's what you can
That's
say.
what that's what people say. And like, and I try to be a little bit humble because, sometimes I like to be the incognito normal guy that just goes and shows up in a Camaro and, goes about my day like a normal guy. But it is cool. And I like that helping people stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I want people to not waste their money and buy the wrong stuff. So hopefully if people had bought the book and it was useful to them and they didn't buy the wrong stuff and they read it and they knew exactly what they needed to get to achieve their build, that's a win to me.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so then you started to go on with the new project is what you call HP Cult.
Yeah.
Tell us what that is and how that came about.
So, as with all good stories, HP Cult kind of started on vacation. Anytime you disconnect from work, I always have an influx of good ideas. No, some of them don't come about, but, I always like take a note of them. This particular one was kind of neat because, I was on vacation, got away from work, and creativity starts when you're on vacation, for me anyway. And of course, when you're on vacation, you have a few adult beverages, and the creativity really starts flowing after a few of those. So we're at the resort, and we're sitting at dinner, and we're at the table with all of our kind of travel buddies and group. And, somebody, I don't even know what the conversation was, but somebody said, hey, I'm an ordained minister. I'm going to marry so-and-so. We're like, oh, how'd you do that? The questions start. Then they're like, well, all you have to do is just sign up online. And so, of course, everybody at the table has their phone. So we go to the website. Like, oh, it's only like $9.99. So why not? I got $9.99. I could be an ordained minister too. And so we all got ordained online, and I think I have a certificate that I've been Reverend Joseph Potak or something along those lines. Officiant, whatever they sent me in my email. I screenshotted it and had to make the Facebook post, of course, because now I'm ordained. But anyway, like, that got the wheels turning. I'm like, you know what? This could make a kind of a business, like, not from the being ordained, but car people, like taking car people to church, like sharing info and taking them to church and having a sermon about car stuff, right? And I went and checked the websites on GoDaddy, and I'm like, oh, that High Performance Church is available. I'm gonna buy that, so I bought it. And a couple of days go by, and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of an idiot. We're not a church. Car people are a cult. Like, anytime you see car people in a group, they're kind of like a cult against like the normal people that don't have modded cars or loud cars. Like, we're the bad guys, right? So like, High Performance Cult sounds way better than High Performance Church. And so I went and checked that. That's available. I got the Instagram, I got the Facebook, I got the YouTube. You have to go through the whole kind of like system of making sure it's available. And then, I made sure, the business name High Performance Cult was available, and then registered that as a LLC even. So I have highperformancecult.com. And then what I did was, it sounded a little bit too long. I'm like, High Performance sounds too long. I'm just going to call it HP Cult. Is that available? Yes, it is, of course. Because I always look into these things. So I have that one. So the website is hpcult.com and .net. The forum's on .net just because I got a free website with the forum. So I'm like, I might as well get the whole shebang. And so what I've wanted to do for the longest time, ever since I finished these books, granted I finished them over a decade ago, was to have someplace to put other writings, bonus writing, kind of like the more, if I had some idea, something that wouldn't fit in a book, I could, hey, put it here on this website. People could find it, and it might be something as simple as a push rod length check.
Okay.
Degreeing a cam, like mini installs, not
Yes.
a book's length, 1,000 words, 2,000 words. And it kind of like escalated to where, I see my buddies doing podcasts and I'm like, I could do a podcast. I have the equipment to do it. I might as well do it. I know everybody. So this could be a thing. And I'm not, doing it for like the glory or, money. I don't think you make any money.
There is zero money
Yes,
in podcasting if anybody wants to know. At least unless you're not Joe Rogan. But
we're definitely not to that level or ever will be.
No,
but
there's not enough car people to make it a profitable venture in podcasting. I don't think.
And I knew that getting into it. But the networking is definitely valuable to me because I want to tell my friends stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I've met a lot of people, throughout, a 2-decade-long career in high performance stuff. Whether it's at the PRI trade show, whether it's at LS Fest racing, or just dealing with colleagues and consulting other businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these people don't really tell their stories.
No.
They just kind of want to do their thing and be left alone. So I'm almost kind of like the annoying guy. I'm like, hey, you ready to, do a podcast with me? And they're like, I hate cameras. I'm like, well, so do I, buddy. But, we could do this and, you could, tell more people about your story because it's, I've heard their story, but I want to tell people and share their story too.
Yeah, I think, and I'm the same way. I feel like a lot of the people I've met have like fantastic stories to tell. And your podcast, and you had 4 episodes out as of yesterday or today, and I listened to the first 3, and you definitely do a better job of telling the person's story than I do. I think I have kind of ventured off into more of the like how the business operates.
Yeah.
And I think I think there's less market for mine than yours. I think people are more interested in the story thing. And that's probably why the original season of Do It for a Living was very successful. It was the story. Mm-hmm. It was a little bit of the business side, but not quite as much as like I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And so there's some like differences there. And, I encourage you to keep telling people stories.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to keep doing the business side of things because it's more relevant to what I'm trying to accomplish. But the stories is I think it's where the interest is. So.
Well, and maybe I'll find some interesting people that need to be on your podcast too at the same time, and I'll refer them over. What's the finder's fee? 0 still?
Yeah, I'll give you 50% of what I make from it, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, it's been really fun, and I've kind of done some build series on YouTube before, and I've been part of other influencers builds. I don't consider myself an influencer by any means.
Well, you are now.
All of a sudden, I think that comes when you get the YouTube plaque. I think. Oh, okay. I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet.
Or
I don't know what it is. I don't think I'm anywhere near that. But like I said, it's one of those things. It's kind of like it's always something that I always wanted to do was to do some form of it, and now I have the opportunity to. And everybody I've asked has seemed to be interested in telling their story too. And especially with me, for some reason, I don't know if I have a magic way of deceiving them into all the glory or whatever it is. But no, so far, everything's gone really good. And I know a lot of people. So I think sharing their story is really going to be kind of neat for me. And then I get to interview them kind of on my venue.
Yes.
And share their story with other people.
And for people who don't know, yours is actually a video podcast.
Yes. So
you can do, like YouTube. So we do YouTube as well, but our YouTube is no good because it's just audio overlaid a picture, right?
Right.
So it doesn't have any traction on YouTube because it's not fun to watch a picture for 2 hours.
Yeah, I did both. I'm doing the videos and then I, scrape the audio off and then have it published to the podcast.
And that's the direction I plan on going here. And maybe for not all the episodes, but for certainly some of the content, I want to have a video aspect.
I think the audio is probably the easier way to go. Mm-hmm. The video makes it a little bit more.
Way more expensive.
I don't want to say chaotic. Yeah, it does. It's way more expensive as far as the gear and. Like I'm doing mine in person too, so as much as I can do, because it is an expense to travel.
Sure.
So I want to nobody's paying for this other than me, so I want to make sure the people I bring on are high value, are going to bring content to it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to just interview like a dealer tech at the local Chevrolet. Sure. I mean, somebody may have a story.
Yeah, somebody with a story that may be more relevant to like the the industry growth.
Well, to
whatever,
the network even
Sure.
too, like to other people that I build, because I'm hoping that people I interview are listening too
Yes.
at the same time. So I'm growing that organically, like kind of that boots on the ground networking.
Yep. Okay, and you kind of described like the goals of like giving people stories, but there's more to it than that. Like you're putting in a forum on the website, and tell me about your plans with that.
Yeah, my plans are, I think forums have kind of gone extinct in a way, a little bit extinct anyway. It feels like they're kind of in the old folks home now. And I don't think they should be. I think forums are, they should be a go-to place of an archive that, people that go on there can ask questions, get reasonably close answers, or hopefully correct answers. And it stays there.
Yeah.
It just kind of becomes like an encyclopedia. And forums, have suffered at the hands of, social networking, which, I'm a part of. I'm part of the problem because I got Facebook and Instagram and all of the other social media. But, if you post something in one of the user groups on Facebook, sometimes you don't even find it 5 minutes after you posted it.
Yes.
Like you won't even find it on the group somehow.
I've posted something that I posted and can't find it 5 minutes later.
Yeah,
right?
and I think that's really kind of like a bad thing for like an enthusiast to be, because their question may not get answered, especially if nobody sees it, right?
Yeah.
So the forums, there's going to be like no censorship. There's no advertising that's going to be on there that's not pertinent to the website. If there's advertisers, it's going to be like shops that are pertinent to that user group.
Yep.
Like there's a Hemi channel, there's a LS channel, there's a LT channel. I want people that, sponsors of that website, if I bring them on, that can go in there and help the people out with the questions, help the people that they cater to.
Yep.
And I think that's the way it should be. I don't want like Google ads or anything. Not to say they're bad, but I don't want all of that extra people. Like, I don't want to be talking about barbecues on my phone somewhere and then it pull up on my forum.
Yes, right.
I don't want that at all.
Yeah, and it's also what I loved about the forums was even though you could anonymize it with your name, you really knew who the same people were always, which this is, I think, a complaint about social media is they just kind of feed it to everybody. So you can have like Joe Blow, who may or may not be a bot, commenting on your stuff and saying stuff that may be completely wrong, and you don't know who they are, and then everybody just assumes that they're an expert as well. And so there's an aspect of the forums where you could give yourself reputation, and you could tell who are legitimate people and who are not, and it mattered.
You could see like the history of that person's post, and you could see if they have helped people in the past or if they're just kind of a troll, and hopefully not a troll. And that person who is asking that question, and also I grew up kind of in the forum age, maybe the golden age of forums, with the LSs.
Yep.
2001 to really, I would say probably like 2013-ish is when the forum heyday was. But I still think that they would be a useful tool to most of the enthusiasts. And like I said, it gives me somewhere to put my writings, but also there's a forum tab on there. So there's articles on the front page, and then there's a forum tab. And really, they could kind of all cross-reference each other in a way, because when I post an article, I'm going to share it to Facebook.
A blog really is like kind of all three of them, right? It is social media. It is also a forum post. It's kind of like fills all three of those.
So,
roles.
like, let's say if you get a bunch of people asking a certain problem, like, hey, what's the ring gap supposed to be? Well, instead of somebody asking that question once a week forever, you could make a blog post and explain, hey, this is the right way.
Yes.
And if it comes from the website, it's a more credible source than whoever the person answering that might be on Facebook or wherever.
Right.
So that, and plus, I wanted one place where everything is kind of linked together, and it's, I don't want to say it's a resume, but it's just kind of like a home for the writing, home for any of the technical articles, the podcasts. I will put those in their own little sub forum, and maybe there'll be some feedback in there, or maybe I'll find somebody else to interview that comes about from this if it grows, and I'm hoping it does grow.
Yep.
And forums are kind of like, I don't know, like a community.
Yeah, I think it's way more a closely knit community than Facebook and Instagram are really just very casual. Like,
Yeah.
you don't really get to know anybody that well. And the problem is the people you do know really well, you're friends with them on Facebook, and then you just never see their stuff they post. So you like, Facebook controls who you are close friends
Right,
with, and I don't really
right.
like that part of it at all. So.
Well, it is a business, of course.
Yeah. Then they're feeding us ads nonstop.
Yeah,
like we were
yeah.
talking about at dinner. Like we scrolled through my feed, and 75% of them are groups that I have never followed before or ads, which is crazy. That's we're accepting of 75% of the content we consume not being relevant to what we signed up for, right?
And it used to not be like that.
No.
A couple
Definitely
of years ago, it was more like, hey, you're friends with this guy. You're going to see, he posts up his baby photos or whatever.
Yes.
And you would see that stuff. And now people post it. And granted, you can kind of sift through it and find what you need to find. But it's harder to do now with all of the ads and stuff. And almost to the point, like, I don't know any other way to advertise other than Facebook, like a podcast. I think that's really the only way nowadays, because it's not like I'm going to take out a newspaper article or a phone book ad and say, hey, come look at my website. So really, it's kind of like a necessary evil.
A Google ads is not a thing either. Like, you have to target the community that's going to listen to it.
Right.
I mean, as much as I dislike it, the car community really anchored themselves in Facebook. Like, I see none of it on Twitter. There's maybe one or two people that I might know that are on Twitter or X.
Yeah.
Instagram is pretty popular, but it's not like content to consume.
It's not like a group base.
And it's also not like you can't write an article about doing an LS swap in a Jeep.
It's very Instagram to me is very anonymous, which certain cultures like in the Middle East, you'll find people love Instagram because it's very anonymous, and you don't have to like say who you are. You could say, hey, look at my Jeep or look at my Camaro or whatever, and that's all you have to do. You just post a photo, let it ride. Whereas Facebook is more social. Like, you have your real names on Facebook. Versus forums, like, when people first started getting online, they never used their real name.
You had a handle.
You were 2002 W6 Black, whatever your handle was.
Right.
And Facebook has kind of taken that away. And I know more people from, like, when I see friends from the forums post on my Facebook, in my head, their username triggers.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, that's John. I know his username on the forum. And it is kind of funny because I was like, you're programmed with those people's names for a decade, and then now you have to know about their real name. And I don't even know some of those people's real name that were on the forums. Unless I just got really close to them at an event somehow.
Yeah. So what kind of, you're doing this now, so you're obviously doing podcasting, video and audio. You started a webpage, you put a forum on it. You really ventured a long way from like designing cams and manufacturing stuff. Like, so what kind of skills do you find yourself having to learn, and like, how are you accomplishing that?
So because I try to be resourceful as much as I can, like whether it's car stuff or internet-based stuff, I'm trying to do as much as I can so I don't have to pay somebody. Like, I don't really want to pay somebody to work on my cars. If I'm capable of doing something, I'm going to go and do the LS swap myself. It may take me longer because, I have to fit it into life and everything, and adult chores, all of the honeydews that you have to do around the house. So versus paying somebody, it does take me a little bit longer to do my own builds. As far as the podcasting, the editing and stuff like that, I have had to learn new skills. Like, I'm not an audio engineer, and I've made that known. So a battle I've had to do is the audio. And so I'm always kind of looking over at the camera to make sure that it's recording. I see you doing the same thing with our recording. So that's kind of a new thing, and you have to do it at the same time as you're focused on your guest. So making sure that you have a good video and content to take home to go and edit is important. The video editing was something that was this huge bear to achieve. Like, I've tried it in the past, and I don't know if I just had horrible software or whatever, because I've been making videos and sharing them on Facebook for feels like 8 years, ever since GoPros were popular.
Right.
And they never were good. It was just like, hey, look at me skiing. Hey, look at me dying off this cliff. It was all always like just clips. And now I'm taking and using forcing myself into learning the video editing stuff because A, I have the time now, and B, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it.
Sure.
Because I don't want to pay somebody.
Yeah.
And I know I could pay somebody, but or I could use an app, but I want to learn it the right way.
Yeah.
And then, if there is an easy button somewhere along the way that I find that makes my job easier, I'm going to use the easy button, of course. But if I know how to do it, it's kind of like being an operator of like a CNC machine.
Yes.
The best operators are machinists.
Yes.
Like they're not a button pusher. They know what's going wrong as it's going wrong. They don't, run 100 parts and be like, oh, look, it was wrong. At the end when they do the QC. No, they usually catch it the first time it's messing up because it'll make a different noise. It'll make a wrong machining pattern. The tool will chatter. And because they're a machinist, if they're a good machinist, they'll stop it then instead of making 100 bad parts. So that's the thing having to force myself to learn was the video editing, which I'm glad I'm progressed. And if you watch the videos, you can see my first one was pretty crappy. In my last one, I was starting to do video transitions and stuff. So I'm getting better with every one.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm about to go down the same path trying to do the video part too. And I've been doing the same thing you did, following YouTube videos and Reddit posts on like what equipment to get and how to do it. And I've toyed with the idea of paying somebody to tell me what equipment to buy and how to set up the studio.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's value in that versus how much time I devote to doing this or not. But I don't know if I'm going to go down that road or not. Maybe I will.
I think there's enough info out there versus like the car scene. There's a lot of
video people.
There's a lot of video people, but a lot of them are hobbyists.
Yes.
And they're doing stuff because, well, maybe they're making their video because they couldn't find something for themselves to do it. So they're a hobbyist that, doesn't want to pay a shop or whatever. And so they go and force themselves how to do their window motor.
Yes.
And they're probably not the best person for that video because the best person for these videos is probably somebody that's out there doing it and doesn't give a crap about a video camera. He's just out there flagging his hours, right? Yes. He doesn't want to share his secrets. So you end up getting a lot of subpar people on the internet for car stuff, it feels like to me. Now with the video editing, documents and sharing, those guys just want more views.
Yes.
So they're going to tell you your secrets so that you keep coming back for more. So I think the quality of what you learn off the YouTube videos from the other video editors is actually better than what you learn from other car people in the car business.
It is definitely excellent. And I found that too. Like they do in-depth reviews of every single type of camera you could ever need, every light you could possibly use. Like there's like multiple reviews of everything, so it makes it easy to see what to do.
Yeah.
And my plan with my studio is two things, right? So obviously to make these Do It for a Living podcast episodes. I also like doing like tool reviews and like shop management content. And a lot of that has required video, and I've done it in the past. And even with the like I guess garage quality, like me recording it onto my phone, they still get thousands of views. And it's like, now if I can put actual professional content, like make it a professional content, I feel like the more people would watch it. And so that's kind of the direction I want to go. And then the third opportunity is when we start growing our web store, or now that we're starting to grow our web store with the shop, I want to make the like how to install like the flex fuel kit that we manufacture. And the surge tanks that we make our own. We weld the billet end tanks we put all it together as a kit. And then installing that onto a car, or the bumper latch kits, whatever part it may be. I want to use the video equipment to also show you how to install the product, which I can then host on my website, right? So there's a lot of value in there, and shop owners in general, you think you just need to fix cars, but like you also need to know how to be a bookkeeper. Yes. You need to know how to be a janitor, because your toilets are going to clog eventually or leak or whatever. And you need to be a video expert, right? So like there's all these things that you just never thought of.
You have to always be changing your hat.
Yes.
So you put on your plumber hat when you have to do plumbing. Put on your CPA hat when you have to do accounting.
Yes.
Yeah. Put on your customer service hat when you have to do customer service stuff.
Yep. So
yeah, there's definitely a lot to do. And I have dabbled with the idea of starting my own place, but I know what it takes to run a place. And I'm one of those guys that I'll talk myself out of something because I'll be like, oh, you know what? I could probably make it last like 2 or 3 months, but how do I get those customers in month 4? Like, how do I find that guy that at month 4 is going to pay my bills, right? And I'm sure that goes through your head nonstop.
Sure.
And I don't know if I would want that. So my stuff is very low overhead.
Yes.
My expenses are spending a hotel, some gas, the video equipment, the podcasting equipment.
The good news is that stuff is a one-time expense.
Yeah.
Relatively.
I mean,
you can
you
upgrade
have to
it or update it.
at points, but at some point you would hope it leads into some network connection or something to where maybe you do a video for somebody, some connection, and maybe you get paid a couple $100 and you could buy something better at some point. But like you said, the podcasting itself, there's really not a whole lot of glory with it as far as a paycheck.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. What's something you struggle with business, and how have you had to deal with it?
Oh, as far as like being a manager of people in the past, when I've been a manager of people, and I've been a manager of anywhere from a team of about 8 to about 15. And I automatically assume people have the work ethic I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I ask somebody to do something or tell somebody to do something, I automatically assume they're going to do it my way. And I don't have to go and check up on it. And you probably know this. Usually you're more of a babysitter than, a leader in a way.
Yeah.
And you have to really kind of help your employees kind of come up with these ideas that you want them to come up with on their own. Like you almost have to lead them to the answer, but have them come up with the answer of how that solution needs to be happened. So it's almost like a mind game in a way where, you have a meeting with someone and you say, hey, this is our goal, but I don't know how to get there. And you know how to get there, right?
Yes.
And you almost have to like spitball some ideas with them. Like, hey, what if we did this? And you give them some wrong answers. And then they come up with something like, hey, boss, what if we could do it this way?
And it's the right answer.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Do you think you could do that? And then all of a sudden it's their good idea.
Right.
But it was your idea. We're trying to, I don't want to say trick them.
Lead the horse
You're
to
leading
water.
The horse to water in a way. It's almost like every time it's the employee's idea, it's a really good idea. So you just have to get them to come up with your good idea without you telling them it's a good idea.
Sure. And when they actually do think of it themselves, they're more proud of the work as well.
Right,
yeah.
Right. The accountability is a lot more there. And I'm, like I said, that's something I struggled with because I just assume everybody does what I do or knows what I know. And not everybody knows what I know. And I have to keep telling myself that all the time.
Okay. And what's the worst experience you've had in business?
I always talk bad about the private equity, and that's definitely going to be probably the worst experience I have, because like I'm a person that creates products that didn't exist yesterday.
Yeah.
So, sometimes I'm the idea person. Sometimes it's a team of idea people, and we, think of, hey, what's the next step? What do we need to make that will actually be a success story tomorrow? Getting that past the people that are in charge sometimes of that is very hard to do.
Okay.
Because they want to know how many are going to sell in a year, how many are going to sell in 3 months, how many are going to sell in 6 months, how many in 9 months. Well, you have absolutely zero data other than your experience in this field. And as an enthusiast, I know it's going to work because if I want something, I know there's some other crazy people out there that want it too.
Yeah.
And you could market to that. And these kind of corporate people, they're not really car people. So it's very hard to explain a camshaft to a group of investors how it's going to sell just based off your words.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be a hit. What proof do you have? Absolutely none.
Sure.
And that's been a little, I don't want to say it's a struggle. It's kind of like, it is a bad experience though, to me, because nobody takes you for your word when they're corporate.
And that's where I'm at right now with some manufacturing of parts. So we just finished designing the oil filter housing for the Evo engines, right? Mm-hmm. And it's because the cars are old, the parts discontinued. And they do somewhat often have problems where you have to just toss them. And if you can't get any more of them, the part is limited. So my buddy Lance, he took it upon himself, and I told him this is a good product because nobody makes anything. There's no solutions to it. You can't get the original ones anymore, so there's a dwindling supply of them. And they are getting very expensive used, and even then you still run the risk of them being cracked or broken or not usable. And so he 3D scanned it, 3D printed it, we test fit it. Then he had an actual CNC aluminum one made. And so he's got the prototype made now. And so the question is like, well, how many of them do you order, right? So like in my head, I'm like, well, I need them, but like how many do I need? Like 5 a year? Like I have no idea what the quantity is,
those
right?
projections of something that's unknown are very hard to do. I would say, like, if I was going into it, I would probably order like an initial order to get the price where I want it. And, try to make your money back on the first 5. And then if you have to buy 5 more, you sit on those.
Yeah.
That way, at least you're not invested in it too much.
Right. Yeah. And then that's the trick is that, like, the manufacturing obviously drops dramatically the more of them you make, right?
Yeah.
So if you make 50 of them, it's way cheaper than making 10 of them, right?
Yeah. Usually the magic number's there's 2 numbers. Like usually about 25 gets you a discount and 100.
Okay.
Like it's usually 2 different levels. Like 25's like it's worth doing, but you make way more at 100.
Yeah.
But you might have to sit on them for a couple of months to do it.
Right.
And so if it's a bunch of different part numbers, you may not want to do the 100 number at first, but you could do the 25. But also, like, if you're third party manufacturing a lot of stuff, you have to also look at their schedule too, because if they are backlogged 2 months
and you need more of them, you won't get them.
And you run out in a month, you're out for 2 months.
Yes.
So you have to always factor in that stuff. And because their priorities are not your priorities, they have other customers, unfortunately.
And a really low production thing like that is very low on their priority list, right?
Yep. What a lot of manufacturers will do would be, or buyers to manufacturers will do like a blanket purchase order. Like every quarter, they'll say, "Hey, I put in an order for 1,000 trinkets," and then the next quarter it'll be like 1,200. Now, when that time comes, you're just in a line.
Yes.
So you could change that number anytime up until they make 1,000.
Yes.
So you might be able to change it to 500, or you could maybe change it to 1,500.
Yeah.
But at least you're on the waiting line at that point to get that stuff done, because they haven't made it yet. You're just waiting in your queue until it gets to your time. And the same thing, you could always adjust those numbers throughout the year. Now that's mass quantity too. It's not 10, it's not 5. But stuff like that does make it hard because you don't know where to start because you have no history, you don't have no historical data. All you have is kind of the experience of, hey, how many of these have I sold in the past similar to it?
Yeah.
And if it's a replacement part, that's a pretty easy one to get. But also the opportunity is you might sell more because now you have a more engineered part, maybe.
Right.
Maybe a fail-proof part.
You can make it so you have extra ports on it for your oil pressure.
So now you have options. So people may buy it because they want to upgrade now.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. So I guess I'm about to learn how many is the correct amount to buy.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll find out what the price point is. Like, get a price point of, maybe 10, then see what it is at 25.
Sure.
What makes sense.
Yep. And we do have those price points. So they did tell us what it will cost on different volumes of ordering. But I guess it really is to see how many we sell. But what's something you have going on that has you pumped up?
The podcast right now is pretty high up there. I always have opportunities, being in this business. Like, technically I'm unemployed, quote unquote, but I've been busier than I've ever been. Now I'm doing the stuff that I want to do right now. But I do have, irons in the oven, technically. As far as, in the swap world, I have some opportunities there that, the right time has to come about for all this stuff. We'll probably have to talk about some of that stuff on a future podcast, but it's definitely LS swap related.
Okay.
Something I'm working on. But, I'm always, meeting people, greeting people, and talking to them about their businesses as far as the consulting.
Yeah.
So I have some consulting stuff going on.
Sure.
That,
because you have a depth of manufacturing experience
that
many people could pull off of.
And instead of being, some people would be like, why don't you just go and get a full-time job somewhere? Well, to me, that blocks me from all of my other passions right now. So I want to fulfill what I've already started and obligated myself to. But also, some places don't want to pay a full-time consultant. That is a ridiculous amount of money for the year.
Yeah.
But they could afford a part-time consultant easily. And multiple companies can't afford parts of my time to give them. And that may be all they need.
Yes.
They may only need a week a month. They may need 2 weeks a month.
Yeah.
And I am perfectly happy giving that time to somebody because it still gives me my freedom in other segments of my life.
Okay. And then this one, we touched on it a little bit, but with it being a new website, a new podcast, what are you finding to be successful ways of promoting it, and how do you want to promote it?
So, a lot of the guests have done a lot of promoting for me because their reach is another reach that I don't have because their social media is not my social media. So a lot of people have been basically kind of sharing it themselves. But what I found is just, regular content updates have worked. There is some algorithm out there that figures out who's watching, who's liking, who watches your video for 10 minutes and, all of that stuff. I haven't really gotten that far into that algorithm stuff. I know people really exploit it and get really big on the YouTube and stuff. I don't think I'll ever get to that point where I'm really looking at like every little thing that I say and everything that happens in the podcast. Right now, advertising on the social media stuff it's working okay. I probably will end up having to pay for a little bit just so I am the guy that is your 75% of ads instead of somebody else.
Okay. And let's go to the quick answer question stuff here. So what's a game-changing product you've seen in the last year?
Oh, man. That's a hard one. Game-changing product. Are we talking automotive?
It could be anything, really. The last guest said 3D scanners.
That's not the last year. I mean, the affordability has come down.
Yeah, he talked about it more like it used to be a hobbyist thing, and now it's really a commercial thing with affordable price tags on it.
Yeah. Man, there's a lot. And, I go to like the PRI trade show and you get to see a lot of new stuff there. A lot of people have kind of the highlights there. I'd say something in the swap world that could be really neat when this gets more into the wild is HP Tuners has released their own standalone ECU.
Okay.
Now they're known for being able to
reflash
the factory computer. So they've taken basically that experience and those I don't want to say deterrents, the stuff that doesn't work for the factory computer, and they've made their own standalone for kind of like the swap world. And I think that is something that I would say is pretty game changer because now you have a company that knows the OEM side and now they're delving into the aftermarket side of complete standalone.
Okay.
So I think that is something kind of neat that I look forward to working with a little bit more.
Awesome. And do you have a favorite app that you use daily?
Oh, man, I hate to say it, but I use Facebook a lot. I use it for the marketplace, though, for a lot of stuff. But I'm forced to use it a lot more. There has been days that have gone by where I haven't even opened Facebook. But now that I'm doing, my own podcast and doing some networking, I'm finding I'm using it a lot more than I want to use it. And I almost feel like it's kind of like a necessary evil in a way.
Yep.
And I don't hate it, but it's just almost like if I didn't have these friends on here, this is my only way to reach these people, my friends, my family. It has helped me to see family across the country. It has helped me to see, friends across the country. But yeah, I hate to say, I'm sure that's a lot of people's answer.
Yeah, it's mine too.
Yeah.
What's your favorite shop tool?
Ooh, man, hammer. No.
That was our last guest. Adam Hammers is a power hammer. He's a restoration guy.
Yeah, like one of those forming hammers.
Forming hammer, yeah.
Those
actually,
are pretty neat.
Actually, maybe it was a 3D printer or 3D scanner too. But yeah, he talked about that as well. So
I wish I had some better answers prepared.
You're a CNC guy though, right? Like, how do you design your cams and stuff?
There's a lot of math and experience that goes behind all of that stuff. It could be its own show.
Well, I know you talk about it a lot in several of your episodes.
Yeah,
so.
it is. And it's one of those things you don't learn it overnight. And it's kind of like, I talked about electrical not long ago. Electrical is so daunting to so many technicians.
Sure.
And once you understand it, it completely makes sense. And it's almost like probably speaking another language in a way. Once you understand it, you always know it, and you're like, well, why didn't I know that? And I always tell everybody that's electrical, because people will be afraid of relays. Like the simplest electronic gadget you could think of. A relay is just two circuits. You have a control circuit, then you have the load circuit, and they just one tells the other one what to do. Yeah. It's just like a light switch. If I tell somebody to turn on a light switch, that's a relay. The guy's the relay. Yep. It's the simplest thing. And every circuit is a circle. You have the battery. Yep. You have the load. You have the battery again on the opposite side. It's actually not that hard. Now the CAN bus stuff is a lot harder than normal.
Yeah, it's a communication bus instead of just a circuit. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is your car you're driving right now?
I drive my 5th gen Camaro a lot. And I didn't think I would drive it as much as I do. This was actually a chop shop recovery that I bought at an auction. Okay. Yeah. It could have went really bad. I actually bought it last December while I was driving to PRI. And I'm driving to PRI and the auction's ending. I had to pull over to bid on it. And it's a 2014 Camaro. Obviously, the engine and transmission are long gone. Anyway,
the original engine.
The original engine, yeah. Okay. And at this point, I had not even seen the car in person. Like I was, 8 states away or whatever it is. And somebody that was bidding on it was bidding in $500 increments. So like when I first bid on it, it was $500. Well, I bid it to like $700. Then the next bid was $1,000 from whoever else I was bidding against. And once I saw that he was bidding even numbers, because I won it again at $1,025. Well, I knew his next one was $1,500. And so I threw out a crazy offer, like with 3 minutes left. And every time you make an offer on some of these auction sites, it adds another 3 minutes to it. It was very creative in how I did this. I just waited till it was 3 minutes, threw in the offer. And I bid like $1,925 was my highest bid. Now it only goes up to beat the next guy, whoever my opposing bid was. And I got this 2014 Camaro SS for $1,525. Now it's a roller, right?
Yeah.
And I have no idea what's left.
But that's the fun thing about being a car guy is you can buy rollers or salvage shadow cars or theft recoveries or whatever it may be, and you can make them work. Right?
Yeah, and worst case is I go pick it up, pay my $1,500, and I sell it for double that because it's worth more than what I paid, even without even doing anything to it. So anyway, it could have went really bad and it would have been a race car, which is not really bad. Not really. A not street car.
Okay.
And what it turned into was there is enough of the car left and enough of the wiring intact under the dash. And it didn't look it wasn't as bad as it looked.
Okay.
So the photos were really bad. Whoever took the photos just made it look as bad as it possibly can be because I thought, oh man, what am I getting into? My girlfriend's really going to hate me showing up with this car in her driveway. Anyway, I got the car. Engines are easy. LS engines are easy.
Okay.
Transmission I had. So I basically built it up as a drag and drive car. I put in a 427 LS resleeved engine.
Okay.
Put in 6L90. So I did an auto swap. It was a manual car. I did an auto swap. So I did have to know a little bit of the network stuff to make that work. How to make a drive shaft. Put good axles in it. All of the poly and Delrin bushing so it doesn't shatter itself to death when I race it. And then I took it 2 weeks before this event, 666. It was barely running, like it needed alignment. I haven't had the tuning done. I have not even made a pass down the track up until the first day of this event. So I drove it.
Tuning on the fly, right?
Tuning on the fly, yeah. So I drove it to Missouri, and 666 was following Route 66.
Okay.
So about 1,300 miles.
And for those who aren't familiar with it, it's like a drag and drive event.
Yeah, drag and drive
event. You drive to an event, you race, then you drive to the next event and race.
You can't trailer your car. You have to drive your car on the highway or whatever roads they tell you to and do checkpoints with the car you're racing.
Yep.
So you have to have something that's fairly reliable. But it was
unlike
fun.
the drag week guys that are using like pro mod cars on the street, it looks like, right?
My car is slow enough. It was all 8th mile stuff, and I went like a 660 was my fastest pass, which is like a
660 on the 666.
Yeah, okay. 660 on the 666 exactly, which is about the equivalent to like a 1040. just to put it in relation for people that only know quarter mile stuff. And that's pretty good for a stock weight 5th gen Camaro, which weighs like probably 4,300 pounds. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that. So I already signed up for the next one that I can get away with and do.
Cool.
Probably with the same car, I think.
And what do you think the future of automotive performance is going to be?
Oh,
tell me forums. Yeah,
forums are coming back in 2025 and automotive podcasts. That's kind of a hard one because, I don't really know the future of what to expect. I know in my world, I'm going to keep on doing and making, LS swaps better. I'm going to have solutions for the LS swap guys more and more as I keep on chugging along with it. But I think information is kind of the future of automotive. I think having more information readily available is a big one.
Okay. Yeah. We've been lacking that the last 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
However long social media killed the forums.
Yeah. Well, I think info's out there. It's just muddied. Like you have to really tread through the bad to find the good.
You also have to make sure that the AI bots don't strip all your private or the content you generate and use it for their
I'm going to have to figure out a way to lock it down.
There are things that I listened to another podcast about that exact thing that, content creators are mad about, especially this is like more related to like songwriters and authors of books, right? The chat GPTs of the world are reading their books, taking all the data and using it in their results, which is technically
it's plagiarism.
Right?
Yeah,
so now there's these scientists, like computer scientists, that are working on. I don't remember exactly what they called it, but basically it's a chat GPT or like a AI blocker, like an AI.
I need an AI blocker.
Yeah, they're doing things of like inside of songs they add like a white noise that you can't hear with your ears, but it totally screws up the bots that try to read it. And I'm sure it does the same thing with the books and stuff. But and pictures, they were doing it on photos too. They put a layer of non-visible data onto a picture that makes it incomprehensible to the thing. So when you search for like a strawberry with ChatGPT, you'd get a picture of a cow. and they did things like this.
Creative.
They could prove that it was messing up the algorithms. So and you have to repeat it a bunch so that the algorithm thinks like, oh, this is the common answer. A strawberry looks like a cow. Okay, well, every time somebody asks for a strawberry, we show you a cow.
So figuring out how to trick the AI is a good one. Now, there are people that need artificial intelligence because they have zero real intelligence. And go for it. Use artificial intelligence if you need it. But like I said with the books is, I could get AI to write it, but it's taking morsels of information all across the internet that other people wrote and combining it into something that kind of sounds smart.
Right.
But I would rather do my own stuff myself. I'm going to have to look into that and make sure nobody rips off my forums as far as AI bots. I have heard that I've seen that people that write stuff have found their own writings in AI responses.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, especially writers.
Mm-hmm. Because you could recognize your work.
Yep.
Like if I write something, it's different than you writing something that's different than another writer.
So you need to test this afterwards and go see.
I don't want to put anything good out there.
How to do an LS swap into whatever vehicles you like a
see if it's my own knowledge
in a Pontiac
regurgitated back to me as if it's the authority and I'm not.
Right. Okay, so how do we connect with you and your company?
hpcult.com's easiest way. High Performance Cult is kind of the secondary name, but hpcult.com is where I'm going to put everything. If you go on YouTube, High Performance Cult.
Okay, and I'm assuming Spotify,
Apple Podcasts. Oh, there's a slew of them. I think there's like 9 of them, different ones.
Yeah, but
I guess
99% of them come from the Apple Podcasts.
When I was
like mine, right?
researching it was a big portion was Apple.
Spotify's second.
Was Spotify, and YouTube was up there too, pretty high up there.
Yep.
But that's the best place. On Instagram, I just have my last name, Potak at HP Cult.
Okay. Well, cool. I want to thank you for visiting the shop here and taking the time to share your story. And let's definitely collaborate on automotive podcast growth.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website, doitforaliving.net. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now. Seriously. I'll wait while you grab your phone. Open up the podcast app. Tap the subscribe button. When you subscribe, you help us gain momentum and attract more high-level guests. Thanks for listening, and good luck.